No problem, Jackie. I can see you've just popped a note in to say you're finishing your dinner. I hope you're having something tasty.
I fell asleep earlier, so dinner's a bit late.
Good timing.
Good
timing.
I'll see you in a bit. But I'll be here.
See you soon. I will keep an eye out for anybody popping back in. Otherwise, we'll get started. So I'll hand over now to Emily from Yorkshire Zen, or who is Yorkshire Zen. I don't know which you call yourself. Who's joining us tonight. Over to you, Emily.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Nikki. Thank you for having me, everybody. As Nikki said, I'm Emily. I run Yorkshire Zen Coaching, and I'm here to talk to you this evening about unlocking imposter syndrome. I don't want this to be death by PowerPoint, so I do want us to have a bit of input from yourselves as well. So at various points I'll be stopping or asking questions, and if you want to put something in the chat, rather than everybody trying to talk all at once, I found the chat is generally the best way of going about it. And if people are watching on Facebook, I understand that Nikki is monitoring the Facebook stuff, so hopefully we'll be able to feed some of your stuff through as well. Yeah. So who am I and why on earth am I qualified to speak to you? So I'm a certified life coach, and I work with women, mainly introverts, around money, career and confidence. Now, you cannot possibly talk about any of those subjects without imposter syndrome popping up. I'm also a change manager for a large university, so I've got lots of change and project experience, and in that role, as well as with my coaching, I'm empowering people to move from their current state to their future state. And I'm also someone who does suffer from imposter syndrome myself. So a little bit of an insight, after I'd had a chat with Nikki about doing this talk for you today, after the excitement had died down, those little doubting thoughts started creeping in. Can I do this? Am I qualified to do this? So throughout this session, I'm going to be sort of peppering it with some of the things I do personally to overcome those imposter syndrome feelings. So I wanted to start off with this quote from Blair Imani. So lots of studies have been done on imposter syndrome over the years. I think the first proper research paper that was done on it was in the 70s. However, lots of those studies focus on the individual, especially high achieving women, and not many of them focus on the systems and the structures that we all live within. That is starting to change. And we are starting to get research coming through that's taking a different angle and looking at oppression in the context of society. In fact, actually, as I was doing some research for this talk for you, there's an article in the Harvard Business Review this month, which I'm going to pop a link in the chat to it, just because I think it's a really useful article to read, which talks about imposter syndrome in a slightly different way. And I'm just going to quote a little bit out of it, and it says, imposter syndrome directs our view towards fixing women at work instead of fixing the places where women work. Now, personally, I'd take that a step further to fixing how women live instead of fixing the society that we live within, sort of reversing those concepts a little bit as well. And I will hopefully copy the link that I have now and just pop it in the chat for everybody. Oh, it's not working. Never mind, I'll do that later for you. It's a really interesting article to read. So, what is imposter syndrome? Very Well Mind defines it as an internal experience of believing you're not as competent as others think you are. It shows up as self-doubt, inadequacy, feeling like you'll be exposed as a fraud, feeling like you don't belong. And I think personally that imposter syndrome rears its head when we start hitting those bigger systemic limits that jangle on one or more of our self-limiting beliefs that we've held about ourselves for years, and which have been fed by those bigger limits that we all live within. So an example of that springs to mind could be around pricing products. Does anybody come across this? You feel like you want to price something, but actually when it comes to it, a lot of stuff gets in the way. Stories like, well, women should be kind, so I can't charge that amount. Confidence in the abilities that we have because we've been taught to underplay them quite a bit. and other sorts of money stuff.
Upstairs. Go.
So, first one, over to you. Tell me in the chat how imposter syndrome shows up for you, and we'll get that conversation going, because I'm sure as soon as someone's brave enough to say, I'm sure they will not be alone at all.
It's like a bit of homework.
Yeah. So it could be things like feeling like you're not in the right place, like you don't belong, feeling like you are going to get found out by the big bad someone.
Definitely.
Is anyone brave enough to put something in there? Yes, self-doubt, not valuing my work.
No.
Rising, big one. Exactly, Von.
Oh, I do that, Nadine. Yeah.
Not as good as that. They think I am. I compare myself to others all the time. Not being able to put things up for sale, not good enough. Interesting. These are all really good. Well, not really good that you're feeling that way, but really good that you're sharing them.
And you kind of, yeah, I was just saying, do I want to unmute people? Because do you want people just to go through the chat there, Emily? Would you be?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if are you in control of muting and unmuting people, or can people unmute themselves?
I think you can use your space bar, can't you, to mute and unmute? But do feel free to try and contribute if you can, and we'll work it out. Because
so Jackie, do you feel like you can have a bit of a chat about that self-doubt and not valuing your work?
Hello.
Hello. Do you want me to come back to you if you're still eating?
No, that's fine. I guess it's because we're all learning new skills, and I've changed careers a few times, and I feel like I'm almost coming full circle back to being an artist again. And yeah, you do, like others have said, you compare yourself to others, you think others know better and are better than you. Yeah, I think there's always that doubt that, oh, it's it's not good enough.
So it's kind of like a self-worth thing as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And what do you think makes others better than you, or their thing better than yours?
I feel it's probably their confidence. I feel like inwardly, I'm not as confident as others. So I wouldn't be out there on social media saying, look at this, look at that. Yeah, so I've like sort of tried hiding behind, I don't know what really, but I'm not as out there.
Like a visibility thing.
Yes.
That is interesting, definitely an interesting one, and one that I definitely relate to myself as a more introverted person.
Yeah.
Sort of showing up and doing all that can be quite full on. So yeah, definitely hear you there. Yvonne, you talked about pricing and not feeling you're good enough or experienced enough to charge high prices. Do you want to chat about that?
Yeah, I think similar to what Jackie's saying, I mean, I've only been doing this not even a year, and I think it makes you feel like you compare yourself to other people's things, and there's so many pieces on social media that you're seeing every day, all these amazing finished products, and I think you just think, is mine as good as that, really? Because you see all your faults, you see all the bits that you think, I could have maybe have done that better or whatever. So yeah, I don't know, I just feel like, I don't know, when will I be confident enough to actually charge probably what I should be?
And it's that starting point, isn't it? That, because everybody has to start somewhere, and even the people that you're seeing and you're like, oh, like there's a bit of comparison going on, they've obviously started somewhere. And social media, I love it and hate it in equal measure, because it's brilliant. It's a brilliant tool for connecting. Like, I would not be here talking to you tonight if it wasn't for social media. And yet at the same time, you only get that snapshot of what somebody's choosing to show, which can make you then feel less than good about yourselves, when actually you're probably on a much more even playing field than you think.
Yeah.
Cool. So Nikki, you said you worry about getting found out for not actually being as good as I think I am.
Shh, don't tell everybody else. They think I know what I'm doing.
And that's interesting, isn't it? That's like sort of the perfectionism thing,
Right.
coming out like that being found out and being thought of as fraudulent and not being as good as they think I am.
Yeah,
But
both
what
in
does that
terms of
actually mean? Yeah.
Both in terms of creativity and also like knowing the answers to stuff. And of course you don't have to know everything, but yeah, you sort of think if you don't know everything, then you're not an expert.
Exactly. Yeah.
Also, yeah, not being as creative as everybody thinks I am, because I'm like, I can't think of original things. So yeah, but that's just that is the self-doubt, the monkey mind going round and round.
Yeah. And Nadine, you've spoken about comparing yourself to others all the time.
Yeah, again, I'm relatively new to this, less than a year I've been doing this type of thing, but I know, again, you see things on social media and everything you think looks so much better than what you are doing, even although it's still relatively new to me. But I mean, my friends and family are saying, "Oh, your stuff's great," and I'm always pointing out the mistakes to them or the bits that I don't.
And you're
think
like, I don't believe
right.
you have to say that you like me.
Oh, I really like that. I say, but look at that bit there, that's not quite right. And they're like, really? What are you talking about? And you know, it's
that far away.
Like I've not got the confidence to say, yeah, I think it looks fabulous. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting what both of you have been saying about like the comparing yourself to others, and that comparison thing. And I wonder if, and I'll come on to this later on in the presentation, but I wonder if there's something around reframing that and seeing those people as inspiration rather than being intimidated by them, and sort of your proof that it's possible to do that, just because, you know, somebody else has already done it. But I'll come on to that a little bit later on. Katie, you've spoken about you don't feel like you can put things up for sale because they're not good enough. Is that a similar sort of thing, that looking at what other people have been doing and thinking that it's not as good enough, not as good as theirs, so therefore you can't sell it?
I confess I've put Katie in the waiting room.
Oh.
I might explain later, but I can't find her in the group. So apologise. She isn't here to answer that question.
No worries. You put about delaying doing something.
Yeah,
I know that.
I find it, I just I think it probably comes through the sort of nervousness, is it going to be accepted or not? So for instance, I've got stuff now all ready to go up, and I've been putting off doing the Etsy thing, but I just keep putting off. I always think, oh well, I'll do it, but then it's somehow always at the bottom of the pile. So I've been sort of forcing myself to sit down and say, right, okay, I'll have a treat at the end of the day if I've done this, because otherwise I just put it off and put it off and put it off.
Yes, I know that feeling, that having that commitment to yourself and having a bit of an accountability. So kind of, now you've said it in the group, everybody's rooting for you to do it, I'm sure.
Yeah. That's why I put it on when Nikki put her thing up to say what you all set yourself for the week. So I put it up there and I thought, I'm never going to be able to take part in this group again if I don't do it.
That's the same as how I feel.
Oh, right. I've lost where I am. Angela, I think it's you next, talking about people not liking your ideas. And not feeling good enough.
Yes, I think it's a confidence thing again. Thinking my designs aren't good enough and comparison to other people. Yes, yeah. It's my whatever I do, it isn't good enough. So
Yeah.
And yeah, there's quite a few on a similar theme, aren't there, really? And
Yeah.
put about confidence and not being, others are more experienced and more confident, and yeah, it sounds like self-worth and worth of what you're producing and worth of your art and stuff is in there too. And then Kelly, it sounds like you know where your imposter syndrome is coming from, which is a really good sort of reflective technique, and you've obviously done some work there already.
Oh, you need to unmute yourself. Let me just unmute you.
Sorry, yes,
There
yeah,
you go.
I've done a lot of work, Emily, so I'm quite aware of what I need to do, and obviously I can relate to a lot of the other ladies in the group, obviously confidence and that constant need for sort of praise in order to know that you're doing a good job. Am I worthy of being here? So obviously my past is reflective on those things, really. So I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, completely. Makes loads of sense, and something that I can really relate to as well, as I'm sure many people in the group can. So thank you very much for sharing that. It's yeah, thank you, very brave of you. So thank you everybody for sharing their points of view on imposter syndrome and where it comes up for them. I will move us on to the next part of the presentation, and hopefully you'll start to unpick some of that or expand on what you've already said. So just moving on to sort of narratives and blueprints. So we all carry many stories with us from all over the place, from when we were born right to now, and they can be family stories, they can be social messages, not just from social media but from the wider society and the communities that we live within. The media can compound them, and sort of bigger structures like the patriarchy, capitalism, racism, they all feed into those stories that we carry around as well. And then we use those stories as proof. We look for evidence for the stories that we carry, and then keep perpetuating those stories. So for example, I have to do X to be liked, or I can't price something at this amount because women and money aren't, you know, that women are meant to be kind, that's the currency there, not actual money. Hopefully that makes sense. And those stories are part of your brain trying to keep you safe, even when it makes you feel like crap. So the brain's learned all this stuff, which it thinks it's true, and has used it to set those behavioural patterns for yourself, because it does keep you safe. It does keep you either accepted in the community you're in or the family situation that you're in, and stepping out of those patterns sets those alarm bells ringing, and it sets your imposter syndrome sort of stories to come out, and it starts those sort of feelings of low self-worth. And the low self-worth then contributes to the imposter syndrome, and the cycle starts over and over again. So you feel like you could feel like a fraud in a certain situation, so then you over prepare for it, then you second guess yourself, and then you underappreciate yourself. So for example, if you have going back to the Etsy shop example, so if you've set something up on your Etsy shop and you sell it, but then you don't feel like it's good enough, then you feel like you are second guessing yourself, underappreciating what the product actually is and the price that whoever bought it, not making any sense here, the price that it was sold for, and then you devalue that experience for yourself. So instead of making it seem like a win, it's then filed under, oh, that was not a great experience, I don't really want to repeat that again, and so the cycle continues. Does any of that sound familiar?
I can identify with it.
Not. Yeah. I can only see some of you on my screen, so apologies, I can't see you all. Has anybody got any examples of that actually happening to them? I know we've talked about imposter syndrome more broadly, but have you got any examples of it happening? Oh, bless you.
Whoever that
Sorry
was.
about that.
You didn't even move, Louise.
I know, it was my husband in the next room.
Oh gosh.
I know.
Wow.
Quite powerful.
Yeah, definitely.
Rather.
So, yeah,
Sorry.
has anybody got any examples that they're happy to pop in the chat about that sort of thing? So, for example, you've sold something and it didn't sit quite right, and then you retreated from it, or anything like that.
I've got an example. Do I just say it, or do you want me to?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I did a drinks cabinet way back at the beginning when I just started out, and it was a really cheap quality not veneer, like laminate with plastic coating and things, and I hated doing it, and I covered it in paint, and it absolutely stank of smoke. And I tried every trick to get rid of the smell of smoke, but every time my husband came down the stairs, he would say, "That stinks." So when I sold it, obviously the person hadn't seen it, they came to pick it up, and instead of just going along with it, and she was delighted, and she was saying, "Oh, it's beautiful," all I could think in my head was, it's cheap, it's rubbish material, and it stinks. So I actually said to her, I said, I mean, if you want me to take it back next week and fix it, because and I'm saying that the smell of smoke is still there, and hopefully she was going, "I don't even smell anything, it's fine." And her husband's saying, "No, it's in a big room, we'll not notice it," and everything. And it was just, your first sale, and I just thought, my husband's standing in the background going, "What are you saying? Why are you pointing out all the flaws?"
Yeah.
So I then pointed out all the flaws, and I just wouldn't do another cabinet that was made of the same material again, because I felt like I couldn't charge very much for it, even though I'd put in a lot of work, because I didn't feel like I was selling a good product. So,
yeah, and it's sort of that how you feel about it really comes across in the energy of the sale. So you're like, "Oh, didn't like this thing, it was cheap and it smelled weird," and whereas the person who's receiving it has got a completely different perception, because they've not been through that process with you, and they're just like, "Wow, this cabinet's amazing, and I couldn't do that in a million years, so woohoo." But yeah, no, I totally get that. That's and has it put you off, or have you just been put off that material and that cabinet?
Yes, it's not. I'm still not good at making sure I'm getting what I'm worth, I suppose. But yeah, it's definitely put me off doing pieces that are made of plasticky, coated, wobbly. Unless it's unless it's a kind of quality piece of furniture, I do feel like I can't really charge very much for it. So yeah, which is a good learning experience, maybe. But
yeah. Definitely. If you can talk it up to that and not let it put you off, then that would be a good way forward, I think.
And just zip it when it comes to the customer coming around. I've learned that. But
yeah, that is a tricky one though, because I when I'm selling my programs or my one-to-ones, I'm a little bit like that myself, because you want the value and worth to be right for the person, so you don't want to like oversell and under-deliver. So it is hard, I think, for a lot of women in business to be able to pitch things in a way that maybe a man wouldn't, because there's that kind of value, and am I being the right sort of, is this the right thing for the right person kind of thing?
It makes it a bit more complicated for us as well, working with vintage furniture, I think, because there's some flaws to be expected. So it's hard to, if we feel that, are we doing enough? Is it got to be absolutely perfect, or are some flaws okay, and which ones? And so sometimes you don't know when to stop. And when you're letting something go, it's like, "Oh, but it's not perfect." It's like, but it's vintage and it's hand painted and it's okay. And it's, so when you've got self-doubt, it's like, where do you draw the line that it's perfectly imperfect to go as it is, or do you need to push it a bit further, and where's the line? That can, especially, and as people saying they're new, I've been doing it, it'll be 5 years in July, and I still do that every time something goes. I think, is it going to be right? Are they going to be happy? Are they going to see this? And I've learned to step back and go, it's fine, but I still do it, if that reassures anybody else. or does that mean I just need to sort myself out at last?
That was a really interesting thing you said there, Nikki, and you said it's allowed to be flawed. And I think in a lot of industries, a lot of people are like, well, it has to be perfect. I have to deliver this perfect thing. And obviously you were saying with vintage furniture, it's expected to be some flaws somewhere probably. But that sort of allowance of it not being completely perfect in whatever regard, it's an interesting concept to sit with and think about, because a lot of the time we're programmed to be like, it has to be perfect, it has to be shiny and brilliant and wonderful.
I think that's what we try to do, because our expectation is the customer expects perfection, and then you have to remind yourself that vintage can't be perfect, but then we still strive to make it perfect. So we still have that same battle that maybe other industries do of trying to make it perfect, but you know, sometimes need to know when to stop.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is that I think is really interesting, because I mean, I've changed profession a number of times and qualified and again and sort of worked my way up the tree a number of times, and each time I go through the same thing, which is not quite believing that I've sort of made it and I'm competent, and I feel like I've sort of started again on this one as well. So it's sort of like each time I go through the same thing, and I know I'm going to be okay in the end because I have been in the past, but you still seem to go through this same sort of self-doubt right at the beginning.
Definitely. And that's really interesting that you noticed that, and you've sort of sat back and gone, oh, it's a repeating pattern. It is every time.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think when Nikki, you mentioned early on, there's nothing that you can't sort of go over and correct. And that, for me, that's one of the things I particularly like about doing this, is that, there will be a flaw, there's something not quite right. And, you can choose to go back and, work on it. And sometimes it'll be right. And sometimes it won't, and you'll work on it again. I like the experimental side of this. So in a way that sort of gives you permission to do that. And yet still I have this.
Permission to make mistakes and it not be perfect, but we still have to let go of it, don't we, and allow ourselves.
Brilliant.
I think sometimes though the other thing is that because we've worked so closely with a piece for quite a long time, and you work really, really close up to it, you are so aware of all the flaws of it, so much more so than somebody who would just come and have a sort of little look at it. So I think that makes a difference as well.
You get so
when you are intensely aware of every little dint and nook and chip and whatever it might be, and you're trying to sort of make it look the best that it can, and it always looks a lot better than when you started, but perhaps not as perfect as you hoped.
Brilliant. That's really interesting, because I have no experience of vintage furniture whatsoever. So it's quite an education for me, this listening to you all talk about it, definitely.
And it's a very, very women-led industry as well. So when I'm thinking about the fact that this is something that impacts women more because they've had to be in a male-dominated world, and I'm hearing more and more that it's actually more spread across the genders anyway. But our industry is women comparing themselves to the women largely. There's not, there's a couple of figurehead men out there, but there's not. It's mostly women in this industry, really. So
another thing,
doing
Emily,
it to
I think
ourselves.
Sorry, Nikki, and another thing I find is that, you watch stuff on television and it all looks so easy, and how much hard work goes into just doing the simplest thing. And, it's something about sort of recognising just how much you have to put in of yourself and all the your tools, your techniques to be able to produce a really good piece. And so I think it's really important not to sort of get too hung up, just recognise, you don't know all the mistakes they made, you don't know all the things that they had to go through to get to that final article. Probably the similar sort of things that you had to, but if you only have the confidence to just have a go at it, then you'll be okay.
Yeah, that's really good advice, and again sort of goes back to that comparison thing, like you don't know what the story is, you just see the end result. So it could be there's been all sorts of trials and tribulations along the way.
And we don't see the end result we see sort of a glossied version of the end result as well. It's like the Instagram effect. We see the staged and beautiful versions of things, and we don't see the close-up effect of the brush strokes and the bits and bobs that we might see of our own pieces.
Definitely, especially if you've spent a lot of time being about 6 inches away from them, doing
Yeah.
what you need to do.
Mm.
Brilliant. Has anybody else got anything at this point, or should I move on to the next bit?
I think I've got a few things from the previous section actually come through the group.
Okay.
Just a couple of things. Underpricing their work because they don't think what they make is worth more. Sarah, Gaynor saying not thinking the pieces I work on are good enough to put up for sale. And then Francesca's actually saying, thinking I don't belong to this group because I'm not a professional. Which makes me want to give her a hug and say, you're welcome here. Yeah, so.
Thanks, Nikki. Thank you on Facebook, everybody, for putting those through. They're really, really interesting ones. And again, not glad that you've had them, but glad that you're recognising them and can notice them.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. So what can you do about it? So these are some techniques that I use myself to start trying to overcome any of those imposter syndrome thoughts that come in. So noticing what you're thinking, noticing that self-talk or any actions that you're following through. I know we've spoken about those behaviour patterns and people recognising those behaviour patterns. So that's a really good start. If you're then able to take a step back and reflect on those, so is that thing telling you something useful? It might be telling you something useful. Confidence isn't the same as competence, and I think we've all talked about lack of confidence and seeing other people who are more confident than you doing big things that you want to do but don't feel able to. But equally, I would say that also being confident doesn't automatically mean it's any good. And I think sometimes people can come over as super confident and bowl you over with whatever dazzling light they're shining. And actually, when you get down to it, what they're actually producing or what they're saying isn't quite as it seems. And actually, yours is comparable, if not better. It's just been a different light is being shone on it. So looking at whether it's true and what that story is a really interesting thing to do. And then working out if it's your story or if it's someone else's. So family stories are a lot around this. So for example, my mum is scared of dogs, and this is nothing to do with vintage furniture at all, but just to sort of give a bit of an example of this. And up until I was 14, I was scared of dogs too, because that's what I learned. And actually, as I got older and had friends who had dogs and then worked at places where people had dogs in the office, I'm not scared of dogs at all, but it was just that learned behaviour that actually, because I've seen this happen and I've seen this reaction, that is how I should then behave too. So working out if it is your story or if it's someone else's story is quite a good way of separating out what you want to keep and what you want to change. If you do want to change it, then that's up to you, and you can rewrite that story in a different way by acting and doing mindset work. So you cannot just, unfortunately, think yourself different. By acting on those new stories and living them out, you're providing your brain with new proof about what's possible. Now that doesn't have to be a big scary leap. That can be a tiny shuffle in a slightly different direction. It can be looking at a negative thought that you've had about yourself in a certain situation and flipping it and reframing it in a different way, and sort of saying that out loud to yourself or under your breath if you're not in a place where you can speak out loud. Listing out your positives and successes is something that has really helped me. Not everything is a fluke, and I think we tend to sometimes be guilty of thinking, oh well, that worked that one time, but it was just pure luck. And actually, when you take time to write everything down and consider how far you've come and what your successes have been, actually you build up evidence that they can't all be flukes, like the list is too long and you've made them happen. And looking at how they've happened and why they've happened can be really confidence boosting. And also, I don't know if anybody has, we've not talked about making mistakes so much. Excellent, CBT is a brilliant tool. Kelly in the chat. Yeah, we've not talked about making mistakes, but another tip that I have is reframing mistakes, so seeing them in a different way, sort of as lessons learned rather than beating yourself up about them. Does anybody want to share any sort of positives or successes in the chat, or by jumping on and having a vocal chat, any sort of positives and successes that they kind of half don't want to believe, because that would change the imposter syndrome story a little bit? Or have we got absolute silence at this point?
I have to definitely start challenging some of the voices in my head, and that's how I've got past, I haven't got past them, but when I'm having those thoughts about not being very creative and not being very creative, what was the other one I was thinking? Well, not being as good as people think I am, and is it creative? Anyway, sorry, I'm kind of sort of forgetting the words I had in my head. But then I kind of have to sort of remind myself what people say, and then realize that there's they can't all be wrong and me right. That there must be something in what I'm doing, because instead of me questioning it and going, well, it's not that good, that sort of helps me kick back against myself and go, just shut up, because you must have something about you, with the work you're doing, because of what people are saying.
Brilliant, thanks, Nikki. Has anybody else got anything they want to share? No worries if you haven't, we can move on, that's absolutely fine.
I'll just jump in here. The piece that I did for the upcycling course, the first course with Nikki, it took a while because I'd never done anything like it before, and I was really pleased with it when I finished it, and I thought, oh, does it look great? Oh, and it sat for ages, and then somebody actually came in and bought it, and I mean, I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God. And she went away with it. And of course I was saying, she's going to come back next week and tell me this bit's not right. And then she's going to phone me and tell me she doesn't like this bit. And then she's going to do it. But she never did. And I was so expecting a phone call or an email or something to tell me there was something wrong with it. So, and there wasn't. So that was, I suppose, a success.
Definitely. And sort of a different piece of evidence for your imposter syndrome part of your brain, if you like yeah, it was a sale and it was great.
Yeah
Brilliant.
Emily, I had something a bit similar. I also, when I just started, it wasn't a piece that I did for this, but I did some decoupage, and I did a little table desk type thing for my grandson, so he could have his own little desk at home, and I designed it with him. It was really fun. We did it together, and then I delivered it to him for his birthday, and he was so excited about it. And my son put it on his social media page, and I thought, oh no, I just did it for my grandson. I didn't do it for everybody. Anyway, it got 43 likes, and I had another 3 people wanting something similar. And I just thought to myself, for me, I just thought, oh, well, he's enjoyed it. That's all I wanted. But it was like, it wasn't just fluke, because other people did like it and they did want it as well. And that was the first thing I'd done. So it was quite exciting to do that. But it still makes me doubt myself. I still feel quite doubtful as to whether that was just one of those things, but it was really nice to have.
Definitely. And when you start getting more, that's definitely one for the list, and when you start getting more sort of proof to add to it, then it starts accumulating, and then you can say, when imposter syndrome comes up, you can say, well, no, actually, because look at this list, that I've got of these things. Thank you for sharing. Has anybody else got anything they want to share?
I've got one from Facebook for you.
Yeah.
Sarah over on Facebook says, I used to make jewellery and I went to a school summer fair to sell things. I expected to come back with everything I'd taken. I sold most of my stock and took orders for more sales, and it blew my mind that people actually liked my craft.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you ever so much for sharing that, Sarah. That's really good to know.
That's amazing.
So I'll go back to the presentation now. So we've talked about changing the narrative and changing sort of the story that you're telling yourself, and how you're stepping into that story and acting it out in the world. Because I believe that when we start to change ourselves and change how we not only perceive ourselves, but also start acting and start believing in ourselves a little bit more, then we start changing the world around us as well, and we have a bit of a ripple effect. So we don't have the blueprints and narratives that we want to follow. We're following the ones that are giving us the imposter syndrome and the negative thoughts. So once we start making our own blueprints and following those instead, that can be incredibly powerful. And seeing someone like you doing what you want to do can also be powerful as well, as long as we see others as inspiration and aren't intimidated by them. So a little random story about me, just to sort of explain this point. So when I was little, I had a bike with stabilizers, and I was perfectly happy with the stabilizers on. Thank you very much. There was no need for me to take them off. It was all fine, until I saw a friend riding her bike but without the stabilizers on too, and immediately I wanted to do what she was doing, and so that became fuel to make me move forward and inspire me, rather than feeling like I was going to stick with my stabilizers forever. So sometimes it's a case of needing to reframe how we see other people and how we see other things, and using them as proof for what we're wanting to build towards or step into, rather than as something to move away from and step away from. A little bit of a cheeky question, and I think we have sort of covered it. And you feel free not to answer this if you don't want to, but do you feel like you see others as inspiration or as intimidation?
Bit of both.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Louise. Yeah, there's some people that I'm a bit like, and being very honest, yeah, a bit of both, isn't it? Yeah, only human.
Definitely. Definitely. Anybody else wanting to join in? Or
Probably inspiration, actually, because obviously if there is inspiration, it kind of pushes you to be at that same point as well.
Definitely.
That can-do attitude. So I mean, take Nikki for example. Up until I think I enrolled on a course September last year, and up until that point I'd been looking at sort of joining the course for months, and I kind of just talked myself out of it, thinking, well, I'm not good enough to do that. I'm not creative enough to get to that sort of level and that standard. So I just had a complete different mindset and just thought, I'm just going to jump in feet first and go for it. So, and get with some more creative people. So, and it's certainly helped the confidence, but you still have that self-doubt. It's all just part of the learning process.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Definitely. Brilliant.
It's hearing though that other people seem to have their doubts as well, even when you think that they are really, really good at what they do. That actually makes you realise that you're not the only one who kind of feels like that, and just have a go. And it, like Nikki said before, generally, if you do something wrong, you can try and put it right. We're not doing brain surgery after all.
Yeah.
But actually, you can just have a go. But I think that's come with age for me as well. Caring slightly less what people think, but only slightly.
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? It's a hard one.
Definitely. Thank you, everybody, for sharing those. So if you want to dig into this a bit more and you need a bit more support, coaching is always a good way to go if you're wanting to really dig into something. Therapy as well. I know somebody has mentioned CBT, which is a great therapy for sort of reprogramming your brain a little bit. That's always good. Talking in your community. So like we're doing now, this seems like a brilliant community full of some really inspiring women. So starting this conversation, I'm hoping that you'll feel able to continue it and help sort of support each other as well. Self-reflection, sometimes these things just come to you out of the blue. Washing the pots always does it for me, and getting a bit of a deeper insight into yourself and connecting the dots a little bit, and journaling if you're that way inclined. If you like writing things down, sort of freehand journaling is really useful as well. I always like to recommend some books because I'm a bit of a bookworm, so apologies if you've already read these, but highly recommend Untamed by Glennon Doyle, sort of about living with caring a lot less about what other people think of you, just to sort of
that sounds good.
That conversation in. It's definitely worth a read. Quiet by Susan Cain is brilliant for introverts. I'm not sure if anybody's read that one.
I've got that one on my bookshelf as well.
I particularly like the part where she sort of says, well, the financial crash of 2008 wouldn't have really happened if more introverts were in the room. So particularly like that bit. And The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women. A confession with this one, I've not actually read this myself. It's on my list next to read, but a coaching friend of mine who also does imposter syndrome coaching has recommended it to me, so I thought I'd stick it on the list for you too.
Right.
Nikki has been kind enough, as I'm talking to you tonight, to let me have some time to tell you about my new group program that's coming up. It's called Limitless Money. So if you've enjoyed this and you want to dig into money more as an area of frustration or fear, I know we've talked about pricing and things like that tonight, then you might be interested in this group program. It's for you if you're feeling stuck and frustrated with money, with the numbers you've got or you don't have, or you feel like there's a magic secret to it that you're just not getting, and you want to feel differently about money, achieve your money goals and to have control of it in your way. So I'm looking at launching a small group for a 12-week course. It's launching soon, but if you're interested, head on over to my Instagram or my website and sign up for my newsletter, and you'll be the first to know more. And that is everything I have for you tonight. Thank you ever so much for having me. I'd like to just open the floor up because I think we've got a few minutes left, haven't we, Nikki?
Oh yes, yeah.
If there's anything else anybody wants to talk about or bring up or chat through with the group.
And you do other kinds of coaching as well, don't you, Emily, as well as the...
I do, yeah. So I do
one-to-one stuff.
I do one-to-one coaching. Like I said at the beginning, I focus around career, confidence and money. People tend to come to see me for one of those things, and then we end up talking about all of them. And obviously, because they're so interlinked, whenever you sort of break through a limit in one of those areas, you tend to break through limits in the others. So yes, I do that as well.
Might be having a chat. Yeah, wonderful. That's really great. Has anybody got any questions or anything they want to discuss around this sort of area? I've got a little bit more time. I'm going to check the Facebook.
I think one thing I'd like to add, Nikki, is I think I've mentioned this to you before. I worked in finance for years and years, but I've always been a hidden creative, if you like, and I'd go to work all day and come home, and then my husband would walk in and I'd rip the kitchen all apart. And that's actually on my Instagram. There's a part on there that my daughter's put on where I'm saying, aren't I adventurous? And he's just videoing the whole kitchen, and it's just all falling apart because I've ripped it apart. And I always spent my life doing that, and everybody just thinking I was absolutely insane. And I think what I've really realized through the pushing of others, I think, you know, the loved ones around us will push us into saying, you know what, you're good enough. But what I've realized is that it's okay to embrace your own crazy. Do you know what I mean? Like there's nobody else like you. And I think once we realise, you know what, there's just not another me out there. And so whatever then I produce from that is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even if it's a bit crazy.
That's a really good way of looking at it, definitely.
Yeah. And looking at the positives as well, because as more I sort of accept myself and embrace myself, I realised, you know, some of my perceived flaws are actually why I'm good at the other things that I do. They're the strengths. So being an introvert means that I'm very sort of sensitive and sort of perceptive about what I'm doing as well. So there's, you know, that's it, embracing exactly who you are, because it means you're, good at the things you're good at as well. Yeah, I like that. Embrace your crazy, ladies.
Yeah, embrace your crazy. Everybody calls me Bob. I'm like Bob the Builder. I can hear them on the phone to my husband. They'll be like, "What's Bob doing?" You know, and they all think I'm a bit crazy. So I think, okay, I might as well just embrace it a bit and just be a bit crazy.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much for having me. It's been really interesting hearing your side of things from like the vintage furniture world. It's not something that I've been involved in, so it's been really nice hearing your examples, and thank you for being so open and sharing with me and each other sort of your experiences. It's been really good. So yeah, thank you for having me, and thanks to Nikki for inviting me along.
Well, thank you so much for coming and getting the conversation running. As you said, I hope this means that we'll sort of be able to sort of continue on these conversations and supporting each other with these things, because as Louise is saying, it's knowing that other people are feeling that same way can suddenly make you go, oh, you know, I'm normal. Even if you're crazy, you're normal. You know, it's like it's all right. I'm not the only one that feels like that. And in some ways that can give you more confidence and make you feel right, let's move on, because everybody's a bit wobbly at times about things, but you know, feel the fear and do it anyways. I was saying earlier this week. So yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and good luck with your program as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you,
Emily.
Thank you. No worries. Lovely to meet you all.
Take care, Emily. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Bye, everyone. See you back in the group.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.